told you when we started this project that we would disclose and share all of the mistakes we made along the way, or try to. A lot of times mistakes are made when the builder's in a hurry or distracted. In some cases, a mistake can be made if you make an assumption about something and never confirm whether or not the assumption was valid, and that assumption turns out to be wrong. There are times when a mistake from a previous tradesman, somebody who was there before you were there, bites you, or even the plans can lead you in the wrong direction because you assume that the plans are right, and then you build according to what the plans say, and it turns out that the draftsman or the architect or the designer, or sometimes you, can be wrong with a pencil also. The reason I'm telling you this is because you are watching me build this flight of stairs and build it wrong. I'll explain the details about how this mistake happened at the end of the video. But the bottom line is this, that later in this series you're going to see us tear these stairs out and rebuild them. The result of the mistake is that the rise of each step is 1/4 inch too much, and the run of each step is 1/4 inch too short. We filmed this whole process very carefully and explained every step along the way in great detail, and everything is built perfectly, except it's just a little too steep than what is allowed by the code. Believe me when I say I have not been looking forward to making this video. The tricky part of building stairs is cutting the stringers. And really, it's laying out and cutting the first stringer that's tricky. Everything else is just work. But once you have your pattern stringer cut and tested, and you're sure that everything is as it needs to be, you can use it as a pattern for all the ones to follow. Now, one important thing is that you need to try and be selective about the lumber that you use in stair stringers. By the way, stringers around here are also referred to as horses. You don't want big knots or checks or splits or pitch seams in your stringers, because those defects weaken the board. And you're already going to weaken the board by cutting out those triangular shapes. Now, in a wall, that's not a huge deal because all the weight is coming straight down on the studs. They are in compression parallel to the grain. With stairs, they're acting a lot more like a beam, with part of it in tension and part of it in compression perpendicular to the grain. And so even though these stairs start out as a big chunk of lumber, a 2x12, after the steps are cut, it's acting a lot more like a 2x6 in terms of strength. And a big knot or another defect in the wrong spot can really compromise their strength. It was a serious bummer. First, because this is probably, $300 or $350 worth of lumber and materials. And second, we spent a good chunk of a Saturday building these things and describing how to build these things and, doing retakes and everything that goes along with that now for us. And it took me a couple of days to remember that it's important to not beat yourself up too much when these things happen, because they will happen. But there are very few mistakes in construction that can't be fixed. And besides, it's just a little extra money. It's just a little extra time. There was no harm done. And sure enough, the sun came up again the next morning. Now, there are very few moves in carpentry that are really complex or difficult. Almost all of the individual cuts and fastening and gluing and screwing things down can be performed by anybody who's moderately familiar with the tools. You probably noticed this or had the thought while you were watching these stairs go together that it's just not that big a deal. The first stringer, yeah, that's tricky. But after that, it's just being careful with your cuts and marking and being consistent and assembling the pieces that you cut out. Mass production, really. However, a really efficient carpenter who understands this mass production approach could probably have put these stairs together, probably in 3 hours. Yeah, 3 or 3.5 hours should have done it. It's really fun working with guys who are at that pro level and can make these things look so easy. When I was young in my career, I remember it seemed almost magical, or at least effortless, when one or two guys would walk up to a task like this and then, bang, it was done before lunch. And even though all the individual moves are basic, the muscle memory that develops with using these basic tools can result in some very quick work. At the pro level, work can be done lightning fast, without giving up any quality whatsoever. Carpenters and tradesmen are often incentivized by how much they produce because in many cases, at least in the American Southwest, the more they produce, the more they make, and sometimes it's amazing what that can do to a person's output. Now, the mistake I made when building these stairs resulted in a finished riser height that is 1/4 of an inch too tall, and a finished tread length that is 1/4 of an inch too short. They are built just outside of the allowable range that is acceptable according to the building code. They're steep, and I knew they were steep the first time that I walked up the darn things. Now, the interesting thing is that the real mistake didn't happen on that Saturday morning when you just watched us put these together. In fact, the first time I ran the numbers to calculate the treads and risers, I came up with a riser of 7 5/8 of an inch, which would have been just perfect. After I got that number, I came back over and measured the stairwell one more time and learned that they wouldn't fit at that rise. The reason they didn't fit is because the real mistake happened a week earlier when I built the stair opening and placed the LVL, that beautiful little laminated 1 3/4 thick beam at the top of the stairs that the stairs are resting against. That board was in the wrong spot. I have no idea how or why I did that. But since I measured off of that to build the stairs, they came out wrong. Plus, I did not remember the code requirement correctly, and so here we are.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Thanks for watching our series. I hope you're getting something out of it, and yes, I will go through stair building in detail the next time I build these things. Just a reminder, this series is not designed to be a how-to guide to build a house. We are showing you one way to build one house. It is the big picture concepts that apply to virtually every building project that we're hoping you come away with. Thanks for watching. And, dare I say it, after this episode, keep up the good work.